assignment that I did 2 years ago in 2009. So it's a bit different. I think it's a little bit different from what I'm trying to get writing style I'm trying to get these days. So if it sounds a bit weird or anything like that, just pardon me. It's still a work in progress. First things first, I'd like to ask a question. Do you guys want to listen to a somewhat spooky urban legends based story, or do you not want to? Option.
What's the other option?
The other option is other normal stuff, reasonably normal stuff.
Spooky.
Spooky?
Spooky.
Okay, sure. Okay, I will do the spooky as the last one. So for now, that's the last, right? Come on. So anyway, now we'll be. I'm going to talk about. We're going to give the first short story first, and then we'll do the spooky one at the end. Okay. Cool. Yeah, it's going to be a bit slow because the screen's bloody small. So. For the 5th time tonight, sorry. So I'm a bit tipsy right now. Okay, the name of this piece that I wrote is called Chance. I can't remember why I wrote it, but I just know it's for like the HZ101 component, so Introduction to Creative Writing. So here goes, right? Chance. For the 5th time tonight, he was jerked awake by the faint but insistent rattling of the window panes. The sound of aeroplane engines roaring into the overcast sky from the runway briefly drowned out the soft drumming of raindrops against the window panes. He lay almost motionless between the airport hotel bed sheets, waiting for the roar of engines to die down. When he could hear the raindrops again, he realized it was near impossible for him to get back to sleep. Pulling himself up into a sitting position, he grimaced a little as his eyes adjusted to the ambient light coming from outside. Squinting around the room, his eyes rested on his military duffel bag that stood at the foot of his bed. Closing his eyes briefly, he breathed a soft sigh before pulling the bed sheets aside and walked over to the minibar where he poured himself a finger of whiskey on the rocks. Gently swirling the ice around in its glass, he sat down on the soft armchair facing the window. As he felt the whiskey burn a path down his throat, he leaned back further, and through half-closed eyes, he looked out the lights of the airport grounds as they were diffused into little halos, or refracted into blurred discs of red, green, and orange lights through the rain-flecked and water-streaked glass windows. Trying to reassure himself that he wasn't in a waking dream, he pressed the cold drinking glass against his flushed face and enjoyed the initial shiver running down his spine. 3 years on the front lines, and he finally got his discharge papers yesterday. In 5 hours' time, he would be on the plane back home to his wife and kids. And as he nodded off, he smiled. Down the corridor, the man who checked himself into room 420 with a woman was also awoken by the sound of windows rattling as the plane took off. His eyes snapped open, and for a moment, he felt a momentary sense of panic of waking up in an unfamiliar room. He blinked twice in an effort to reorient himself. Turning his head to the right, his eyes rested on the sleeping features of the woman lying beside him. By the diffused orange glow of the light coming from the streets outside, he was overcome by an admiration of the play of light upon her black hair as it fell across the white of the bed sheets, the highlighted curve of her cheek as it slowly seeped into shadow, the soft fluttering of her eyelashes as he dreamed, and the gentle rhythmic rise and fall of her breast. He slowly extracted his right arm from under her and tossed aside the sheet from his end, goose pimples forming on his arms and legs as the slightly chilly air of the room caressed around his naked skin, while he padded over to the toilet. Flicking on the bathroom light, he instinctively scrunched his eyes tight against the bright fluorescent light and stepped into the toilet, towels chilly to his feet. After he relieved himself, he washed up and poured himself a glass of cold water. Sipping from his cup, he walked over to the window and stared outside. Through the clouds and incessant rain, he could see the blinking red lights marking out the position of a plane as it began its landing approach. Turning away, he looked at the woman lying on the bed, her head nuzzled into the fast diminishing warmth of the bed where the nook of his arm was. He stood there, the rain pattering against the windows, and he knew that come sunrise, she wouldn't find him beside her. She wouldn't find him fulfilling his promise of taking her with him to the ends of the earth. The years they spent together, and this final night would be all that either of them would have to remember of each other. When she awakes to find him gone, she would cry at this abandonment, he thought. She would think that for him the heady, intoxicating days of the past few years would soon be condensed into nothing more than a fleeting image of her face whenever he would be reminded of her. He wondered if, in a different world, he stayed in that bed beside her. 5 doors down, a boy spent the first 3 hours of his 18th birthday trying to write a poem. He almost had the perfect line, but when the plane rattled the hotel windows noisily as it took off, he swore loudly at the interruption as it broke his concentration. Sighing in exasperation, he stood up to get a drink of water from the electric kettle provided at the minibar. Seating himself back at the cramped dressing table, he stared forlornly at the scribbled and scratched paper before him. 5 hours of work, he thought, and only 3 short lines. Picking up his pen, he absent-mindedly began to start tapping it against the tabletop while his eyes strayed across the room. It was then that he noticed the time on his watch and gave a little start of surprise at realizing that in his efforts he forgot his birthday. Smiling, he whistled a few bars of happy birthday to himself and looked out the window at the rain-slicked streets. After a while, he packed up his stationery and flicked off the table lamp. He had enough poetry for one night, and he needed to catch an early morning flight to meet his parents halfway across the road. Before he dozed off, he wondered what would happen next. 12 kilometers above, a plane began to lose power in its engines. 12 hours later, people would shake their heads and say it was a complete fluke that the plane crashed into the airport hotel. They would say, it could have happened to anybody. Yeah, that's it. And I think we have no time to do the urban legend thing, I'm sorry. Yeah, so you can try, I mean, if you want, you can try. If you guys don't mind staying.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Where is it?
Oh. Yeah, you could. Wait, what am I saying?
Sorry, extra 10 minutes. Maybe less. It's going to be a quick one.
Okay.
I hope. Okay, fingers crossed. Okay, sorry, I'm gonna read this fast. Okay, so this is based off an urban legend. All right. I'm not sure if you guys have heard of this before, but I was doing research for it for the assignment, so here it goes. He tapped his fingernail on the glass-covered tabletop in a steady yet rapid staccato. We looked at him, waiting for him to begin his tale. The bartender had just filled up our mugs with another pint of beer, and then we refreshed the plate of chips and salted nuts that were placed at the center of our small table. Over the past hour or so, we have been telling each other strange and wondrous tales that we might have heard of or experienced. During that hour, the mad beat of the rain upon the wooden roof of the pub house had slowly dwindled into a lazy tapping. We looked at each other, and though we shared an unspoken agreement, we all knew that his story was to be the last. And soon, we would all have to go our different ways into the dark night. For the rain that drove us to this place was drawing to the end of its elemental fury, and there were still miles to go before any of us could reach our homes. At length, he paused in his tapping and took a swig of beer. Slowly putting it back on the table, he cleared his throat and began. Janet sat in the near-pitch darkness of the car. Her face was only barely lit by the luminous glow of the dashboard. For an hour now, the annoying tapping sound had beaten a constant rhythm on the roof of the car, though she knew it was not raining. 2 hours ago, the car had run out of gas in the middle of the countryside. Seeing the faint light of a house a few miles up the road, Janet's partner, Susan, had told her to wind up the windows and lock up the car doors while Susan went to ask for more gas from the house up the road. An hour later, tapping started. Initially, Janet thought nothing of it. Instead, she tried to listen to some music to get her mind off the tapping sound. But as the minutes passed and Susan hadn't returned, Janet grew scared. Turning off the radio, Janet unbuckled her seatbelt and was about to open the door when she saw the flashing lights of a police car coming towards her. As the light stopped at a distance from the car, she heard the police officer shouting, "Get out of the car slowly and walk carefully towards me. Also, do not, I repeat, do not look back behind you." Janet did as she was told. But as she neared the police officer, she heard a noise behind her that made her turn around. At this point, he fell silent and began to tap his finger on the table 5 times. We looked at each other in confusion before someone said, "What did she see?" The storyteller looked up at him and in a low breath said, "She saw her partner's head hanging from a tree branch directly over the car, blood dripping from the severed neck. And Janet? Her hair turned white from grief and shock, and eventually she went insane." We sat speechless. Eventually someone blurted out, Did they ever find out who did it?" It was at this point when the power in the pub house suddenly cut out and plunged into darkness. What was the cause of the power outage? Nobody knows. But what I remember most was the strange way the moonlight fell through the window, and upon the storyteller's face, as it perfectly framed a silent smile. Yeah.